Have you ever fallen for someone completely different from yourself out of nowhere? For me, a 59-year-old woman who swims twice a week. That sort of thing seemed impossible. At least until I met our new instructor at the local pool, Alexander. That day, heading to the pool, I thought I'd find myself in the comforting familiarity of my routine. Like always, I'd packed my gym bag, carefully folded my swimsuit and towel. Water always fills me with a sense of peace. When I swim, it's like everything pauses for a while. And as my body glides through the cool water, all my thoughts drift away. I'd grown used to this over the years. But when I heard Alexander's calm, confident voice, something in me stirred. A spark I hadn't felt in a long time. Alexander. When I heard his name, I looked over. He had broad shoulders, strong arms, and that easy smile that was always on his face. Even on the other side of the pool, guiding kids in line and giving instructions, he had this relaxed, assured presence. Young men in their world had long been very different from mine, and I usually didn't pay them much mind. But Alexander broke through all that. Right then I felt myself being drawn to him, and there was no denying it. In the weeks that followed, I found myself running into Alexander often each time he'd give me this look. A mix of warmth and thrill that left me both calm and a little exhilarated. A few weeks later, after I'd finished my laps, he came over and said, "You have an incredible stroke technique." His eyes serious and full of admiration. No one had ever noticed my form like that before. In those moments, under the warmth of his gaze, I couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. I ignored the age difference between us and just let myself enjoy those moments. One day, after practice, he came by to give me a few tips on my swimming technique. As I looked at him more closely, I noticed the definition of his muscles, the broadness of his shoulders, the way his damp hair fell onto his forehead. And strangely, I felt drawn to him, as though he was the only thing in my focus, and everything else faded away. One day, during one of those lessons, it felt like he was standing just a little closer than usual. Gently, he touched my shoulders, showing me how to move for a moment. I felt like I could barely breathe, and a small smile crept onto my face. Alexander didn't look away. He just kept his gaze on me. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice unusually warm. I was surprised, but I loved that excitement, that mix of emotions. And in that moment, I loved being close to him. I was nearing the end of my workout that day. Slowing my pace, I was gliding through the water, savoring the coolness as always. But suddenly my foot slipped, and a sharp pain shot through my ankle. A severe ache spread up my leg. As I tried to get out on my own, everything just seemed to get harder. Alexander was by my side right away, looking into my eyes with a worried expression. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft but with a hint of urgency. "I think I twisted my ankle," I managed to say with difficulty. In an instant, I found myself in his arms. He'd lifted me up, holding me carefully, and I could feel the warmth of his arms around me. My heart started to race, and I quickly looked away, hoping he wouldn't notice the faint blush on my face. But this feeling, I hadn't been affected this strongly in a long time. As Alexander carried me toward the treatment room by the pool, I became aware of my bold red swimsuit hugging my figure. The way it clung to my curves, the bright red color, the tension of the moment wrapped around me. When I glanced over at Alexander, the thought that he might be just as affected as I was slipped into my mind. My heart was pounding with excitement. When he gently placed me on the treatment bed, I noticed he held his hand on mine just a little longer. When our eyes met, he paused. The warmth in his gaze left an even stronger impression on me. In that brief moment, neither of us said a word. But it felt as though our feelings were somehow silently passing between us. Alexander spoke in a low voice. "I'll need to put some ice on your ankle." And he reached for an ice pack nearby. Even the chill of the ice wasn't enough to cool the warmth I was feeling. Those few seconds where we both stayed quiet, lost in the moment, felt like they stretched on much longer. As he helped me, I could feel his eyes studying every detail of me with careful attention. "I don't like seeing you like this," he said, with a slight smile. His voice was soft and gentle, but it felt like there was something more hidden behind his words. At that moment, I became even more aware of the silent pull between us. The feeling that he was just as affected by me as I was by him, combined with the allure of my red swimsuit, made everything even more intense. This little injury seemed to have stirred up emotions in both of us that had been kept under the surface. Alexander held my injured ankle gently, carefully setting the ice pack aside. The warmth of his fingers on my skin made me quickly forget the chill of the ice. As he lightly massaged my ankle, I tried to look away, but I couldn't hide the thrill rising within me with each touch. I took a deep breath, hoping it might calm me down somehow. "This might hurt a little," he whispered softly. His gaze was tender, but there was something else in his eyes. Something deep. A magnetic pull. As his hand slowly moved from my ankle up toward my arm, something inside me sped up. Every movement of his fingertips made my heart beat faster. Suddenly, his hands moved to my shoulder, his eyes never leaving mine. When the space between our lips grew smaller, my breath caught. And then, everything happened all at once. Alexander's lips met mine slowly, almost hesitantly. In that moment, all the complicated feelings within me surfaced at once. As the warmth spread across my face in waves, I couldn't resist him. The softness of his lips, the passion in his touch. I was completely swept away by the magic of this moment. My hands instinctively moved to his shoulders, wanting to feel him closer. My heart was beating so fast, it felt like it might burst. Inside, I felt a rush of energy I hadn't felt in a long time, a mix of excitement and a hint of fear. But right now, being in his arms made everything feel right. That unexpected kiss exploded in a single moment, instantly bridging our two worlds together. In the silence, only the sound of our breathing could be heard. I wanted to feel this moment even more deeply, to let go of everything and simply feel. I could feel how close Alexander was. The distance between us nearly vanished. The thought that he was my best friend's son kept echoing in my mind. And a voice inside me was telling me to stop. "This is wrong. It shouldn't be," I whispered. But my voice was so faint it felt as though even I couldn't hear my own protest. Alexander hesitated for a moment, his eyes holding a question, almost a hint of doubt. But then he leaned down towards my neck, gently brushing his lips against my skin. My breath caught. All rational thought disappeared, melting in the spell of his touch. "Stop. This shouldn't happen," I murmured. But my voice sounded more like an invitation. His kisses moved from my neck to my shoulders, making me forget every hesitation. He was breaking down all my boundaries. And with every breath, I was falling deeper into him. With each kiss, the forbidden pull between us grew stronger, and I was entirely under his control. I tried to hold back, but each time I surrendered a little more. Finally, my reason went silent, and my body gave in to him. What happened? As storms raged inside me, All my resistance broke. An hour later, I woke up beside Alexander's warmth. I lifted myself slightly, looking at his face. He was peaceful and content. But I was caught in a deep conflict. The sweet excitement I'd felt was now blending with a pang of guilt. I quickly got up and slipped out. When I got home, I was still shaken by the intense emotions I was feeling. As the warm water touched my skin, memories of Alexander's touch came flooding back to my mind. The gentle yet powerful pressure of his lips on my neck. His warm breath. My heart started to race again, just as it had in that moment. But when I stepped out of the shower and looked at myself in the mirror, the turmoil inside me returned. Two voices echoed in my head. One side told me that what I'd done was wrong, that I shouldn't have allowed it to happen. The fact that Alexander was my best friend's son. The age difference between us. All of it kept repeating on the rational side of my mind. The other side, though, was the one pushing me to go back to him, to give in to the pull of that forbidden excitement. Even though I went to work the next day, I couldn't focus all day. Every time I remembered Alexander's alluring gaze, the feel of his hand on my neck, the warmth his lips had left on mine, my mixed feelings intensified. I wanted to go back to the pool, to see him again. But I kept asking myself, was it right to let myself be swept up in a moment of attraction and abandon everything? Breaking every boundary? At night, I couldn't sleep. As I tossed in bed, my hands unconsciously ran over my neck as if wanting to feel the places he had touched again. When I closed my eyes, it was as though I was reliving that night over and over in my mind. The expression on Alexander's face, his touch, even the tone of his voice. These thoughts burned inside me, drawing me back toward him. For a few days I tried to control myself. I wanted to not think about him, to prove to myself that these feelings didn't matter. But every time the longing inside me grew stronger. It was as if I would be incomplete if I didn't see him again. Without those looks, those touches, there was now an emptiness in me. I stubbornly refused to go back. But that didn't stop my steps from wanting to lead me to the pool. Even as I made promises to myself, my thoughts always ended up in the same place. Wanting to go back to the pool to see him again. The desire to be near him, to relive those moments, was overwhelming. This forbidden pool just wouldn't let me go. And each time, I felt myself taking one step closer to him. All my rational thoughts fading away. One evening as I stood in front of the mirror looking at my own face, I had to admit to myself, these feelings I had for him were far more real than I'd thought. This attraction was irresistible. No matter how much I tried to hold back, I couldn't escape what I felt for him. And all of this emotional turmoil felt as if it was desperately pushing me back to Alexander.